We've already examined the introduction of Reva and Trilla, so let's compare and analyze their respective backstories and the conclusions of their character arcs. Whereas Trilla's is excellent, it's logical and concise, it's a great origin story and overall arc for an Inquisitor, Reva's is nonsensical, it's forced, it's contrived. We're joining Reva here during her second encounter with Obi-Wan at the Path facility where the would-be rebels, or whoever these people are trapped. Obi-Wan reveals that he's figured out Reva's origin.
Unless you were there the night of Order 66, you were a youngling.
Reva, pained by this awful memory, confirms Obi-Wan's theory and tells him how she was stabbed by Darth Vader, but
I played dead, hid with the body, felt them go cold.
to which I say, no, she did not. This 8-year-old girl did not A, survive a lightsaber through the abdomen, and B, successfully hide the fact that she's still alive from a powerful Force user. We know from the very first Star Wars movie that Force users can sense other Force users. Sure, Darth Vader and child Reva don't share a significant connection, but come on, Anakin is a ridiculously powerful Sith. Do you seriously want me to believe that he not only failed to kill one of the kids he skewered, but also remained completely unaware of that fact? In what universe does that make sense? It's contrived, it's complete nonsense, even in a world of poorly defined and constantly changing rules about Force powers, fuel, or the amount of gravity in space. After that, Reva becomes an Inquisitor. How, you ask? Nobody knows. The show yada yadas right over that part of the story. Somehow this child with a hole seared in her abdomen not only survived, but managed to get herself enlisted as a Jedi hunter, granting her otherwise unobtainable access to Lord Vader. We do get an explanation, which is they found her in the gutter. That's it.
You came to us from the gutter.
What planet was she found on? No idea. Was she sought after as a known survivor of Order 66, or did some Inquisitor simply stumble upon her? Not a clue. All we know is they found her and apparently hate her for having the audacity to not have a middle-class lifestyle after surviving Order 66.
You are the least of us.
The Inquisitor's universal hatred of Reva seems manufactured and forced, completely unearned by anything the show has shown or told us. In the first episode, yeah, they show her clashing with the Grand Inquisitor and the Fifth Brother over her ambition, but that doesn't make sense either because the dark side of the Force lusts for power. It's just what it does.
The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way, including their quest for greater power.
All the Inquisitors should feel that same ambition and seek to curry favor with Vader and the Emperor. And yeah, they shouldn't like each other as a result, but having Reva stand apart is especially hated while the others tolerated each other because she is
the least of us.
Doesn't make any sense. Why any of these Inquisitors should care the slightest bit about where Reva came from, especially since they all come from the Jedi Order, is beyond me. It's unnecessary manufacturing of tension and drama, making the Inquisitors seem like the plastics from Mean Girls, bullying the poor girl who will eventually rise to outshine them all. It's hollow, cheap storytelling that should have never made it past the first draft of the script. Oh, and it still doesn't explain how Reva got turned into an Inquisitor. It's not exactly easy to switch from light to dark, and Reva was a youngling, not even a Padawan when this happened, so she wasn't even remotely fully trained. Would it have been so difficult to have a 2-minute flashback scene showing how she was found, captured, and turned? Apparently, yeah. All we know is Reva somehow survived, somehow was found by the Empire, and somehow became an Inquisitor. What a wonderful, compelling backstory. So here's where the Trilla comparison comes in. We know how Trilla becomes the second sister. After her master gives up Trilla's location, she is captured and tortured, ultimately breaking her will, leaving her only her rage and hatred, turning her into an Inquisitor. This happens at the end of Clone Wars when she is a Padawan to Seer. Oh, and yeah, Trilla is a Padawan, presumably a teenager, and then 5 years later looks like this. Reasonable. Reva is like 8 years old and then looks like this 10 years later. Does Reva look anywhere close to 18? I mean, come on, just get your dating somewhat right. Anyhow, I want to briefly touch on the process of turning Jedi into Inquisitors. As Fallen Order, which is Star Wars canon, describes it, the process is brutal, painful, leaving the victim a shell of their former self. They are broken down, their identity stripped, and are built back up into beings of rage and hatred, easily bent to the Emperor's will. Reva shows no signs of any such torture. She is far too in control of her own faculties. The show makes it appear as if she joined the Inquisitors voluntarily so she could get close to Vader and kill him. I'm not a Star Wars lore expert, but I'm pretty sure the Inquisitors didn't take applications. It's not a volunteer position. Not to mention, wouldn't Darth Vader sense her intentions? Yes, he would. Vader isn't exactly the patient wait-and-see type. Him waiting until she brings him Obi-Wan seems like far too much foresight for the Emperor's enforcer. Darth doesn't really tend to hatch plots. He kills, and he kills without mercy, without remorse, for far smaller offenses than plotting to murder him. All that to say that the very fact that Reva is still alive and in the Inquisitor Corps, knowing what we do about her, is is just not believable. Again, it's forced, it's contrived. It seems like the writers just wanted to have this twist where the main Inquisitor villain was actually after Darth Vader and just shoved it into the plot, no matter how silly it sounded. However, I would suggest that not just Reva, but all Inquisitors on some level should want to kill Darth Vader. Not because of a personal vendetta, mind you. Like I said, I don't think Vader would stand for that even for a minute, but because that's generally how the Sith operate. And yes, I know the Inquisitors aren't technically Sith, and honestly, their very existence in Star Wars is a bit forced, but you can't be tapped into the dark side of the Force and not lust for power. That's what the dark side does to a person. And naturally, when there is someone more powerful than you, and you have made your bed with the dark side, you are going to want to take that person's power. The Inquisitors are only prevented from acting on that greed for power because they fear Vader, who is far, far more powerful than they are. And Vader's knowledge of that fear keeps them alive. Right, so what is Trilla's's motivation? Basically, it's to curry favor with the Emperor and to destroy any hope of rebuilding the Jedi Order. Pretty simple, straightforward bad guy stuff, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, as in, that's a pretty standard motivation for an Inquisitor. If the Emperor likes you, you're likely to gain more influence and more power. No, because she has a unique backstory, at least as far as I'm aware, in Star Wars lore. As we find out over the course of several scenes and conversations, Trilla was betrayed by her master, Cere, who broke under torture and gave up the location of Trilla and some others. This by itself is enough for Trilla, after being tortured by the Empire, to be turned into an Inquisitor. However, the arguably more pivotal moment occurs when Trilla, now the second sister, is brought before Cere. At the sight of her Padawan twisted and broken, serving the Emperor, Cere taps the dark side of the Force, killing almost everyone in the room and allowing her to escape. This act of Cere's reinforces Trilla's's belief that the Jedi are ultimately selfish, a failed organization whose members have no real guiding principles, at least not when their own self-preservation is at stake.
I won't let anyone touch them.
I thought the same thing once.
The physical and psychological torture inflicted upon her causes her to only see the flaws in the Jedi, to see the failure of her former master as total and complete proof that the Jedi are self-serving individuals worthy of judgment and execution. Cere's betrayal planted in Trilla the seed that the Empire exploited, using her fear and anger at being given up to turn her into one of their most deadly weapons. It was the breakdown of a close personal relationship that weakened Trilla and allowed her to be turned. You want to know what happened to Reva's master? Oh, yeah, she died in the process of saving Reva's life. So, who does Reva blame for the slaughter of the younglings, the event that apparently, which it's still not really clear how, led to her becoming an Inquisitor? Apparently, Obi-Wan.
Where were you? He was your Padawan. Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you save us?
Naturally, Obi-Wan, sensing that Reva is not completely crazy because the show tells us as much, and wanting to continue to stall for time, responds, "Well, I was on Utapau hunting General Grievous, the commander of the whole droid army, when I was attacked by my own troops, like every other Jedi in the war at that point. I was kinda busy. Also, Anakin wasn't my Padawan anymore at that point. He was a full-fledged Jedi Knight, a general in the Grand Army of the Republic, and a member of the Jedi Council. It had been years since I was responsible for his whereabouts or actions." Oh, wait, he doesn't say anything. He just keeps his mouth shut as if Reva is right, which she most certainly is not. Anakin was not, at the time of Order 66, Obi-Wan's responsibility. He was a grown man fully in control of his own faculties. Any person with a modicum of sense would realize this. This moment makes Reva and Obi-Wan look stupid, like they have no idea how personal responsibility works. To be fair, Reva does blame Vader for the actual act of murdering her friends and master, so that brings us to her motivation and actions to this point in the story. Let's go over Reva's plan, shall we? She emerges from wherever she'd been hiding after recovering from the lightsaber wound through her abdomen despite being left to die in the middle of an abandoned temple, and joins the Inquisitors because that's something that happens easily, and then begins to hunt down Jedi to gain the attention and favor of Darth Vader, allowing herself to get close to him and kill him. Why does she want to kill him? Well, because he killed Jedi. But didn't she kill Jedi? Yes, she did. Does anyone see the problem here? You could reconcile her motive and actions, assuming Reva is so overcome with the desire for revenge, stirred and prodded by the dark side of the Force, convinced that nothing else matters but killing the man who took everything from her. My problem with this theory is that Reva is just far too in control, far too sane for this to hold water. And Reva's character is honestly kind of all over the place. She starts out brutish and impatient in the first episode and low in the second, but then she's later cunning and manipulative. This cold, calculated version of Reva that's created in the second half of the show does not seem like someone completely out of her mind with a desire for revenge. But the line that really sinks any attempt to reconcile Reva's motives and actions is this one.
They were the only family I knew, and he slaughtered them.
only family she ever had. Okay, so Vader murdered her siblings and her mother, effectively, and she reacts by hunting down her uncles, aunts, and cousins in order to get close to Anakin. Are you serious? Really? Reva's motivations and actions hunting Jedi in the name of killing Vader would be so much easier to buy if the very thing he did to win her ire wasn't killing Jedi. It's not Vader robbed me of a life of authority and power, it's Vader stole my family from me. Lines of dialogue like this are so important because they underscore where a character came from, who the character is, why they do what they do. Credit where credit is due. I like this line in a vacuum. It tells the audience a good deal about Reva's history in a short time, helping us understand who she was before Order 66. But in this instance, it actually serves to undermine the legitimacy of the character's motivation. It creates an emotional, familial tie to the Jedi Order that was never truly severed, like Trilla's's was, making Reva's choice to hunt down that very family contrived and nonsensical. And yes, she absolutely hunted and killed Jedi.
You won't stop him alone.
You have no idea what I've done alone.
If that isn't supposed to imply that she has killed Jedi all by herself, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, this is a woman who chopped off the hand of an innocent bystander for being slightly impertinent. Safe to assume she has murdered Jedi in cold blood. It makes me so mad that the line about Reva's family was used as a throwaway to slightly strengthen in the writer's minds the depiction of her hatred for Vader. There could have been so much more exploration of Reva's character, a child raised from birth in the Jedi Temple, in stark contrast to Anakin, and how and why she turned to the dark side. But I'm saving my full thoughts on that for a later video on Reva's character. Alright, now let's take a look at how the stories of these two Inquisitors end. I guess I shouldn't say end yet for Reva, since she's probably showing up in Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 2, or her own show if my sense of modern Disney Star Wars is correct, but for now her story is complete, so let's compare. Reva finally gets what she has sought for the last decade, a chance to take out Vader, and it goes about as well as you would expect. I appreciate the effort the writers went to in this episode showing Anakin and Obi-Wan in the past, their story ultimately paralleling Vader's duel with Reva. It's quite a bit on the nose, but it's pretty fun. However, this doesn't seem like Vader. In the flashback, Obi-Wan fights without his lightsaber because he has to. Vader has his lightsaber here, and he's got a former master to chase after. Why is he wasting time dancing around Reva? Yes, I know it's to show how much stronger Vader is, but it's the wrong way to do it. He should simply overpower her in a brutal and efficient fashion. That's his way. Brute strength and power, solving the problem by attacking it head on. He must have had Toph as a teacher.
You've got to face it head on. And when I say head on, I mean like this.
It's just not believable that he defeats her without a lightsaber and then gives her a lightsaber back and then takes that lightsaber from her and then now he's okay with stabbing her. Why go through all that? Why waste all this time? What is all this tomfoolery? Vader, just kill her, man. That's your way. Just get rid of her. That's the way you fix things. This is nonsense. Thankfully, the show is not so poorly versed in its Star Wars lore that it has Reva win. Well, not initially, anyway. And she gets another lightsaber thrust through her chest. If at first you don't succeed, I guess, huh, Darth? And then this dummy shows up and says this.
Revenge does wonders for the will to live, don't you think?
Gee, I don't know. Don't you think that that might also apply to the person lying, dying, or not, at your feet? How stupid do you have to be to say this and not realize how it might cut both ways? Is the Grand Inquisitor a total idiot? Why even write this line? It adds nothing to the show other than the weakest explanation ever for how two different characters survive 3 skewerings between them. I hate this line so much. Anyhow, to nobody's surprise, Reva survives getting stabbed. Again. We, the audience, can only guess wildly at what happens immediately after this, because the next time we see Reva, she's yada-yada'd her way to Tatooine, alive and well, the only effect of her lightsaber wound being a new hairdo. This is when my suspension of disbelief filed a restraining order against this show. I don't need to spend any more time on this absurdity other than to say, stop it. Please stop it. Before we continue with Reva, let's revisit Trilla. Near the end of the game, Cal defeats the second sister in a duel, taking the Jedi holocron, a bastion of hope, or so he believes, for the Jedi Order, and saving the lives of the Force-sensitive children listed within the artifact. Seer then shows up and pleads with her former Padawan, apologizing for failing her, and the two of them begin to reconcile.
I failed you. And I am so very sorry. I've carried so much hate for you.
It appears that the wounds inflicted upon Trilla are not beyond healing. The catharsis is short-lived. Now that is how you make Vader intimidating. His mere presence, indicated by his ominous breathing, strikes fear into any who recognize the sound. The man's very breath paralyzes his enemies, or those who have failed him.
You have failed me, Inquisitor.
Avenge us!
And Trilla has the decency to actually die. Fallen Order crafts an excellent final scene for Trilla. Beaten in combat, her will is weakened and she is open to persuasion, especially from her former master who knows her well and still cares deeply for her. But as she begins to come around, to turn toward the light she had struck down, she meets a brutal, sudden end that is all too typical for those who serve the dark side. The scene starts to build up hope of redemption, only for it to be cut off by the mercilessness of Darth Vader. It's basically what should have happened to Reva, but didn't, so Reva could redeem herself, no matter how unrealistic and ridiculous that redemption might be. Let's talk about that so-called redemption. Reva finds Owen and Beru's farm. She fights and miraculously doesn't kill them. She does at least show some slowness due to her wound here, thankfully. And then she chases Luke off into the night, which produces the funniest scene I've ever seen in Star Wars.
Where is he?
Owen and Beru sound like me calling for my dog when he's taken a bit too long to do his business at night. Go out there and look for Luke, you knuckleheads. Anyhow, Reva finds Luke and intends to kill him. She's about to kill him, but then she has a vision of herself as Luke, so she doesn't. Yay! Much redemption. Very unpredictable. What a plot twist. I'm stunned, I tell you, stunned. I am so impressed Reva didn't murder a helpless child. Truly a paragon of virtue. What about the other Jedi? Young and old, she probably murdered? Oh well, she's good now, I guess. And finally, we have Reva's conversation with Obi-Wan after she so bravely doesn't murder Luke.
I couldn't do it. I failed him. He killed them all and I couldn't do it.
Yes, you failed them. You failed them by hunting other Jedi in the name of revenge.
You haven't failed them by showing mercy. You have given them peace. You have honored them.
Oh, no, she did not honor them by sparing Luke. You don't get to go 9/10 of the way toward total depravity, stop a step short and get praised for it. You might get an award, though.
The not as much of a jerk as you could have been award.
Have I become him?
No, you haven't become Vader. You know that. You refuse to do what he did. That was the whole point of the previous scene. Why seek validation from Obi-Wan? Oh, is it because the writers realized this is supposed to be an Obi-Wan show and needed to inject him into this scene? Seriously, it feels like he's forced into the script of his own show here. I don't want to dismiss the idea of redemption, but this just isn't how redemption arcs should work. A character should not be fully intent on revenge in the most despicable way possible, plotting to kill a child, and then suddenly, of their own accord, repent of their intended evil. That's not an arc, it's a sudden drop-off. Unlike Vader in Return of the Jedi or Trilla in Fallen Order, Reva has no history, no relationship with this person. She has no external force nudging her in the right direction. She just out of the blue realizes, oh, this is kind of like when Vader tried to murder me when I was a helpless child and I didn't appreciate that. On one hand, no duh. On the other, you think maybe she would have realized that when she was out killing other Jedi? You know, her self-professed family? Sure, maybe Luke is the first child she's ever tried to kill, but she was totally about to torture Leia in episode 4, and we can't know that he is, so I don't think that theory really holds water. It's an incredibly sudden 180-degree turn that is brought on purely by Reva and Reva alone, and it's forced and unconvincing. To be fair to the writers of Obi-Wan Kenobi, working an extra character and a Force user at that into the middle of Obi-Wan and Anakin/Darth Vader is no easy task. There are a lot of expectations held by fans of the Star Wars universe for those major characters, how they should talk, act, and react to various situations. That being said, I think they could have handled it a lot better. Reva's Inquisitor origin story makes little sense, both because of the unbelievability of her survival and the yada-yadaing of her years in between Jedi youngling and full-fledged Inquisitor. They could have, and for as much screen time as Reva got, should have, spent more time exploring her backstory and journey to this point. The story we get feels like it was cobbled together in less time than I took to write this video. How could they have done it better? Well, I'm working on that. Also, they really didn't need to insert Reva into the Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader story. Let her hunting Obi-Wan, or maybe even him hunting her, be its own story, its own season. Make her have a unique perspective, a different reason for hunting Obi-Wan, a fighting style and personality we haven't seen before, and you have the basic building blocks for a solid season of a show. But no, we promised the fans Obi-Wan versus Anakin, so we have to cram all this into 6 short episodes. The Fallen Order story works much better in large part because it doesn't try to insert itself into greater Star Wars lore. With the exception of Vader's cameo at the end of the game, basically no major characters show up, at least not in any significant way. Trilla is a villain with relatively simple motives, but a unique backstory that adequately explains her turning to the dark side. Excellent writing and wonderful voice acting.
You're learning. Not quite as gifted as Seer's last apprentice, but not bad.
Her story is small and compact, not straining the player's suspension of disbelief and ending in an appropriate, if brutal, fashion. It sucks that Reva's backstory and redemption arc were so contrived and nonsensical. I think a rash, brutal Inquisitor, that is, what Reva tried to be in the first 2 episodes, could be a good addition to the Star Wars canon if done well, standing in contrast to the more calm, cunning nature of Trilla and the Grand Inquisitor. Seeing an Inquisitor really embody the hatred part of the dark side, that could be quite interesting. Too bad we didn't get to see it here.